Bueno. Hola. Hola. ¿Ya? Bien, buenas tardes. Vamos a empezar. Soy Marcos García, de aquí de Medialab Prado. No estuve el primer día, pero ya os he visto algunos en el taller. Quería daros la bienvenida a esta presentación de David Weinberger. Para nosotros es un honor muy grande presentar a David. Somos muchos los que desde aquí en España hemos seguido su trabajo desde hace tiempo. Creo que el único libro que ha sido traducido al español fue el Manifieso Cluetrain, que es un libro de finales de los 90, pero luego hubo más. El más influyente creo que fue en su momento, creo publicado en 2007, Todo es Miscellaneous, Everything is Miscellaneous, que influyó mucho en muchas personas de distintas disciplinas, desde bibliotecarios, personas que estaban pensando en políticas públicas y sobre todo aquellos que estaban pensando cómo Internet estaba modificando las formas en que se está produciendo el conocimiento y cómo eso podía afectar a organizaciones, a lo mejor no directamente en el plano online, pero también en el ámbito pues, organizacional, físico, presencial. Después de ese libro vino otro que se llamó, que podéis encontrar online, que es Small Pieces Loosely Joined, hablando de cómo funciona la web. Aunque no sé si ese es anterior. Y el siguiente sí que fue Too Big to Know, que es el último libro que ha sido publicado hasta ahora, donde sigue reflexionando sobre las implicaciones de la red en las formas de que entendemos el conocimiento. Coincidiendo con que David había sido invitado al Foro de Cultura de Burgos, que va a ser este fin de semana en Burgos, del 9 al 11, pues aprovechamos la oportunidad también para invitarle al taller de inteligencia colectiva para la democracia y luego también mañana que vamos a tener un taller sobre bibliotecas como laboratorios ciudadanos. David ha reflexionado mucho sobre el futuro de estas organizaciones, de las bibliotecas. Ha sido codirector del Laboratorio de Innovación en Bibliotecas de Harvard. También ha colaborado y ha sido fellow en el Berkman Center, ahora es Berkman Klein Center en la Universidad de Harvard, sobre las implicaciones, donde se estudian las implicaciones de Internet en la sociedad, en el mundo, ¿no? Y le propusimos hablar de la relación entre conocimiento y democracia, que es un tema clásico, y cómo podemos entender ahora la democracia en un momento en que también las formas de abordar la producción del conocimiento han cambiado. Ese fue el reto. Creo que David ha estado preparando una presentación específica para la sesión de hoy y ayer estuvo también paseándose por algunos de los proyectos. Así que nada, solo me gustaría que le diéramos la bienvenida y muchas gracias también a Anne, que ha venido a acompañarle. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Marcos. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to be here. The thing I'm going to take back to Boston, the one thing for sure is that Boston needs one of these, needs a media lab. I've just been really impressed by everything I've seen. So I'm going to talk about networked knowledge and democracy. It's going to be weak on democracy. I'm going to do my best. My background is as a long time ago an academic philosopher, so my idea of what knowledge is pretty old-fashioned. But that's what we're going to talk about. Well, this will work. I guess I'll stand behind the lectern. This was working just minutes ago. Technology sucks. So this is the greatest time in human history to be somebody who genuinely wants knowledge, is a genuine seeker of knowledge, but it's also pretty clearly the best time in human history to be a complete idiot. In fact, you know, if you look around today, it often seems like the idiots are in charge. Last night, I'm an American. I think America had a really good night last night. Some of us stayed up basically all night watching the returns, and I would be a puddle on the floor if it hadn't turned out the way that it did, which is my way of saying I am very sorry about Donald Trump. So let's talk about what knowledge used to be in Western culture. It's obviously a complex thing. I want to just talk about 4 different characteristics. The first is that from its very invention in ancient Greece, knowledge was a reduction of beliefs. There are lots of beliefs, only some of them are worthy of the title of knowledge, and knowledge was invented to be that reduction of belief, to be that reduced set. Second of all, it's settled. We don't say that something is knowledge if people are still arguing about it and it's not sure which way it goes. And it's just not knowledge yet. Only once it's settled do we call it, traditionally, do we call it knowledge. For thousands of years in the Western tradition, we've had this idea. You may notice I'm talking about the Western, I'm scoping this. We've had this idea that knowledge is not just some collection of facts or truths. It expresses the beautiful order of the cosmos, of the universe. And there are lots of different ways that this has been done. Most of them in the West following Aristotle, including Linnaeus in the 1700s, who organized everything into a set of hierarchical categories. Quite beautiful, sometimes a little crazy, but the idea was these things, knowledge has to go and form a perfect, beautiful whole. Okay, I will do this 2 more times in the course of this talk. This is my promise to you. Fourth, somewhat weirdly, knowledge is a type of stopping point. The benefit of having a body of knowledge is that when you have a question like what is the atomic weight of carbon, you don't have to go do original research to figure it out again. We know what it is. It's there, it's settled. You can look it up and stop. You got your answer. Books have footnotes, of course, but usually they are there not so you can follow them, because very few people ever do. It's to let you know that, yeah, you can trust this. So in that sense, knowledge has been a stopping point, and that's been much of its virtue. It's one of the reasons why we are the dominant species on the planet, for better or for worse. Some days, clearly for worse. Each of these characteristics of knowledge, of traditional knowledge, reflect the medium of knowledge, which has been paper and books and libraries and newspapers. And I don't think that's a coincidence. The Canadian thinker Marshall McLuhan, I'm echoing him in this, that the medium has something to do with what we take knowledge to be. So books are filtered. Many authors submit them, relatively few get published, many get published, very few make it into libraries, because libraries, they have to throw out books to make room for new ones. So it's filtering all the way through, and then you filter in what you're going to read. Paper requires filtering because it's a physical object. It takes up room, it's expensive, and knowledge, by coincidence, also is a matter of filtering. Ink settles into paper and cannot be changed. Can't get the ink out. Knowledge is what we think of as being settled. And I think it's clearly not an accident that knowledge took on that property when literacy became common, became a thing. Knowledge is orderly. Well, when you have, say, a library full of books, you have to organize them. You have to order them. If you're an author, you have to plan your ideas out into a series of sequential chapters, almost always. And so knowledge also has taken on this property of being orderly. And knowledge is a stopping point, because, I think, to a large degree, because books, I say this as an author and as somebody who loves libraries, books are stopping points. You're reading a book and there's something that you don't agree with, you're not sure if you should believe, you check the footnote. It's there so you will not have to leave the book. You will not have to get on a bus and go back to the library and start doing research. The very nature of books just assumes that they are stopping points for the reader, and much of their virtue and value comes from that. But the form of the book, of the writing in the book, has that form because of the limitation of paper as a stopping point. So we have an old medium that we've done very well with, and we've done very well with knowledge, but all of these are ways of getting around the most basic problem that humans have faced since we became humans, which is we have very small brains. We have a kilogram of brain or so, and we want to understand everything. We want to understand the origin of the universe and the Big Bang and the death of the universe at some other point. We want to understand what it means to exist and love, and we want to understand everything. And we have this much brain. It's extremely limited. And so we have come up with a variety of techniques to get around that limitation. But now we have this new medium. Well, I'm sorry, let me give you an example of what this causes us. Just a really quick, simple example, because you all know this. So the best English language encyclopedia, until Wikipedia killed it pretty much, was the Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica. It came out maybe once a generation. They would do a new revision. So in 1911, there was an article, I picked this at random, pretty much, Oliver Goldsmith, a British poet. It was 6,000 words. It was written by a famous British historian. New version comes out, 1961, it's down to 3,000 words. Last version, it's down to 1,500 words. It's not because the Britannica hates information. It's because it was 35 volumes. There are economic and spatial reasons why it can't get as big as Wikipedia with over 5 million English language articles. It has to make these decisions. And so Britannica, like everything else, throws out information. It has been throwing away information and some good writing because it was chained to paper. We have been doing this throughout our civilization. We throw away information all the time, and it's a tragedy. It's a scandal. We haven't had a choice about it, and we make the best decisions we can. But that we got used to this as a good way of knowing the world is by throwing out information, it's a problem. But now we have a new medium. It's a problem with paper, of course. We have a new medium that is not paper, and so we should expect, perhaps, knowledge to change as well, if the medium has something to do with its structure. So I want to point to, I think, 5 different ways in which networked knowledge, which I think is what's happening as opposed to paper, is changing the nature of knowledge. And then I'll talk about how knowledge is screwing up democracy. Yeah, sort of. Okay, so the first sort of property of network knowledge is that it's edgeless, by which I mean something pretty straightforward. So if it's 1923 and you've been following the work of this young physicist named Einstein, and he has this crazy theory, and you know that that there's an experiment. We need an eclipse in order to do this experiment. Everybody's waiting for or you are anyway, waiting for the eclipse. And it happens, and sure enough, turns out Einstein was right. The sun does bend starlight around it. And so you get it in your newspaper, and this was front page of the New York Times, and you're really excited. It was amazing. Einstein was right. Now you have so many questions. There's so much more you want to know. And so you do nothing, because there's nothing you can do to find out more, because it's 1923, and all you have is this little rectangle of information, and that is all you have. This would not be tolerable today. So now let's say it's 2011, I think, and the Large Hadron Collider, most important physics experiment in the world, gets some surprising data that seems to show that neutrinos travel faster than light, which would mean Einstein's wrong. So this is really important data, conceivably the most important data since Einstein. The scientists who discovered this could have published in any journal in the world. Any academic journal would have loved to have had this, but they didn't. They instead put it up on the web on a site that doesn't even, it's not even peer reviewed. Any scientist can post whatever she wants there. It's archive.org, fantastic open access site for research papers. And they did this because they wanted to get the information out quickly, whereas journals can take a year before they publish something, but primarily because they didn't understand it. Was that data correct? They wanted to know, because they're good scientists. And so they posted it not only to get it out quickly, but so that a web of comment, explanation would arise around it. And so that's what happened very quickly, and all sorts of, you know, the internet, right? All sorts of posts from other physicists and from junior physicists and from journalists asking questions, and high school students trying to get their homework answered, or crazy people with theories about it, and data scientists and machine learning. It's the internet. People suggested, answered, responded, communicated, made stupid ideas, put out great ideas. And if you wanted to know about this science experiment, this data, because you read about it in the little rectangle in your newspaper. Sorry, that sounds like I don't like newspapers. I love newspapers. Nevertheless, if you got it in the 1923 manner, and you wanted to know about it, you wouldn't even, the point was not even to go to the original paper. You would go out on the web and you would encounter the linked pages and you would work your way through them. That's where the knowledge was. The knowledge was not in any one of these nodes, it was in this network of nodes. That's network knowledge. And it's very new and it's very different in a number of ways. So one of the ways that this is different is in filters. So this is Clay Shirky, a wonderful thinker and writer, who a few years ago said, when information overload was what everybody was talking about, as opposed to fake news, which is what everybody's talking about now. He said, you know, there's no such thing as information overload, there's only filter failure. And he pointed back, as others have, to within Western culture, periodically, all the way back at least to the Romans and possibly to the Greeks, people felt overwhelmed by information. You'll find, you can find the quotations of ancient Romans saying, that, oh, I've got so many books, I'll never get through them. We've always had too much information. We get this sense of being overwhelmed only when our filters aren't working. When the filters are doing their job, we're feeling pretty good. So no such thing as information overload, only filter failure. And I completely agree with that, but I want to add one more thing to it, which is, and our filters work differently now. So it used to be, in the age of print, that filters are straightforward. When you submit a manuscript to a publisher or books are made available to a library, to filter means to separate the ones you want from the ones you don't, to physically separate. The result is the ones that get filtered out, if let's say you're a publisher and you're getting all these manuscripts and you pick 1 in 100 or whatever, the 99 that don't get published are invisible. You will never find them unless you run into the author at a party and she says, you will never find this stuff, it's gone. But that's not how filters work on the internet. So on the internet, let's say I'm a blogger, I am a blogger, and let's say I'm blogging about my favorite health sites, which I would never do, but let's just imagine. And so I have, these are the 7 I think are really great, and I put, those things are links. Of course, I'd be stupid if I didn't link them. That'd just be irresponsible web behavior. These are links. And so all of the other millions of health-related sites and content that I didn't link to is still it's completely available to you. It's not invisible. You can search for it. Somebody else will have a different top 10 or top 7 list. Somebody will forward you the link in Facebook or Reddit or whatever. It'll be tweeted. All of this stuff is completely available. I filtered, right? I picked the 7 I like, but I didn't filter anything out. All I did was shorten the number of clicks it takes for you to get to those 7. On the internet, we filter forward, and nothing gets lost, not like the Encyclopedia Britannica and every other printed medium. Okay, so the next thing that I think is different about this is how we organize things. Because we're used to organizing taking a mass of stuff and deciding where things go. And frequently this can be very hierarchical, as with Linnaeus, but this sort of organization comes from how we sort laundry. I'm wondering if I have the right version up. It's been a very long day, and it'll take a second to switch if I realize I'm going wrong. I think it's right. So the way that you don't need to see my laundry. The way that we sort laundry is, damn, I was sure I had a different slide that I made this morning. Okay, the way you sort sorry, I'm tethered. The way that you sort laundry is that you have places on your shelves for, I'm gonna make this up, but winter clothing, summer clothing. You also have business clothing, perhaps. You have outdoor fun clothing. You have party clothing, et cetera, et cetera. You have a whole bunch of categories. And a lot of your clothing falls into multiple categories, because you may have winter party outfits. So do you put that into your winter pile or into your party pile? I'm not saying there's a right answer to this. The point is you have to choose one. Everything has to go in one place and only one place. That's a real limitation. It's a limitation of the physical. On the web, on the internet, we don't have that limitation. We can put one thing in multiple categories. And this really blows apart 2,500 years of how we've thought about coming up with the perfect organization. We can instead each come up with our own organization and put one thing in many different places. I know we all take this for granted, but we shouldn't, because it's new. We've broken out of the physical. So a bunch of examples, all easy. Google, Gmail lets you create your own tags. These are all tag-based. Steam, the game, Steam, the game portal? Wonder how America-based it is. It's huge in the US. Lets you make your own tags as well for lots of different sorts of tags. And some of those tags would not make the manufacturers very happy about the tagging. My friend Doc Searles, he does a lot of photos. At Flickr, he gives things lots and lots. He's very generous with his tags. Many of them are individual and idiosyncratic. They pertain to him, and nobody will ever figure out what they mean. Who cares? That's fine. He can make tags that work for him and that work for the public, that make it more findable to anyone and make the photo more findable for him. This is a really good system. It's incredibly messy. I don't mean Doc's system. I mean in general, putting things into multiple categories, whether by tags or other ways, multiple folders, et cetera. This is really, really good. This breaks us out of a real limitation of the old sorts of organization. Because it turns out that ordering things, it doesn't scale. It's great when you're doing your clothing. It does not scale. You can't find things, you mislabel things. Things need to be in more than one place at a time. Order doesn't scale, but messiness scales like crazy. It can get as big as you want. It's the great thing about messiness. And as long as you have tools, as we now have developed, for finding things in these messy collections, we can let the mess get as big as we need. And the awesome thing about messiness is that messiness scales meaning. Every tag that Doc Searles makes for his photo and somebody else attaches to his photo or to a game or wherever else, all those cumulative tags and sortings and organizings are all available simultaneously. Each expresses some idea of meaning for the person who creates it. Messiness scales meaning in a way that Linnaeus's little chart of each thing, each species contained with in another hierarchy, does not. That sort of hierarchical organization, many benefits. It's also aesthetically beautiful. In some ways, it's very efficient, but it too throws out information. The differences between things, the richness of their interconnections gets leveled by having to organize things the way that we have when our scheme of organization came from and inherited the limitations of the physical. So here are the three characteristics I wanted to point to of network knowledge, and this is a transition. So edgeless, that is, these networks of knowledge where there's no border around it. That means, however, that there's nobody who says this knowledge goes here. This is part of the web of knowledge about the faster than light neutrinos, which, by the way, there was a faulty connector physical connector in the system. So that's how the bad data got generated. I don't want to leave you in suspense. Einstein was right. There's nobody who says, can I connect my, so I don't know anything about physics, but I have an idea maybe how this happened. Can I connect? Can I link to the very paper that put forward the science? I don't have to ask anybody's permission. That's how it works. It's a permission-free environment. There's nobody who says this is part of that network, this is not. It is edgeless, which means the power of the validators is at least diminished, if not gone. Second of all, who chooses what to filter? Well, we all do. We all filter all the time, and there's no way to view the internet without using some type of filter. I mean, think about what that would even mean. I mean, it's bits flowing through wires in the air. I mean, we always, everything we see, we filter one way or another, and we spend an enormous amount of time helping one another filter. Sometimes collaboratively, officially, sometimes just by passing around links or by liking something on Facebook or on Twitter. These are all ways that together we filter. Who chooses who gets to filter? No one. We all do it. We all filter. We all choose for ourselves what filters to engage with. An organization? Well, who gets to make sense? It was Aristotle, then it was Linnaeus. For hundreds of years, it was Linnaeus who, nobody's going to tell you what you should tag your photo, nor should they. All of these have to do with power. Each of these is a way in which power has receded from authorities, sometimes to our great detriment. But it has receded from authorities, and now it's ours. We're the ones who validate for ourselves. We're the ones who choose what filters we want to engage with and what we want to filter for others, what we're going to like or blog about, if anybody still blogs, other than me. We're the ones who make sense of things, and we do it together all the time. We do it explicitly in conversations all the time. It's what much of the web is, us making sense of the world together. Again, we can do it terribly. We can do it in ways that focus hatred on people who, well, nobody deserves it, but that focuses hatred on the most vulnerable people. We can do that. We know we can do that because we see it around us all the time. But we also do it in every instance where whatever we're talking about, we are together trying to make sense of the world. So now let's talk about how that goes wrong. The failure of social knowledge, of network knowledge, and these networks are social. Even if they're not occurring on a social network like Facebook, a platform like that, these networks are all social because they're created by humans who are connecting. So how many of you are familiar with the echo chamber argument? Okay, a smattering. I was going to explain it anyway, but that's good. So this has been a very hot topic, I think, around the world, but also in the US, certainly, since the early 2000s. The idea is that Cass Sunstein wrote a book, Republic.com, I think in 2002, and the idea that the argument is, if you give people infinite choice of what they're going to read or view, I'm old, so I say read. If you give people infinite choice, we all will just naturally go to the sources that we agree with. The result of this, says Sunstein, and clearly on the internet, people have infinite sources to choose from. The result is, Sunstein thinks, I'm not sure he's right about this, but it's certainly plausible, that if you only read things you already agree with, then your beliefs get confirmed. I think that's pretty clearly true. It further confirms your belief, and there is some evidence that will also, even worse, make your beliefs more extreme. Worse for democracy, which is Sunstein's ultimate concern. So I don't want to, this is a real problem. I think there are issues about it, but it's certainly a real problem. But you know the anti-vaccination people? You know people who, I don't know how important the movement it is in Spain. In the US, it's unfortunately significant. These are people who believe that vaccines cause, for example, autism and other things you don't want your children to have. and so they refuse to get their children vaccinated, and as a result, there's a rise in particular communicable diseases. Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean? Okay, so shorthand is they're anti-vaxxers. So I want to be really careful, because it will be very easy to misunderstand what I'm about to say. Because, are you telling me to go slower? Okay, sorry. The translator, who I assume is doing a fantastic job, and I'm so sorry that I'm speaking so quickly. So here's the dangerous thing I want to say. Both anti-vaxxers and some set of medical researchers doing real research, real scientists, both of them are in echo chambers. In this sense, if you are a scientist and you see there's a Facebook group or a Reddit whatever, wherever the echo chamber is, and you want to enter it and give them some science and tell them why they're wrong, they're going to shut you out. They're going to say, look, you're just a shill for big science or something, which is sort of what they think. And likewise, and so they won't listen to you. You're not going to get anywhere. They've heard the science already. They've rejected the science. And likewise, if an anti-vaxxer comes to the medical discussion group and says, well, I think you guys are all wrong, don't you know, and they cite the paper, the research paper that started all this, and that's been discredited and withdrawn and was a fraud, the medical researcher is going to say, I'm sorry, we're trying to talk about important stuff to advance science. We don't have time to deal with you idiots. They're both in echo chambers in that sense. They are both talking with people with whom they agree. Yet, this is the important thing, they're both in echo chambers, but the problem is, therefore, is not that they're in echo chambers. The problem is that the anti-vaxxers are wrong. They're mistaken, and that's the part I want to be clear about. I'm not saying there's an equivalence here, and we ought to be equally, no, they're wrong. And the scientists are not. What's going wrong is not that they're in an echo chamber, it's that one of them is wrong. Echo chambers by themselves are not only not evil, I want to say that something like an echo chamber is required for understanding, that understanding itself and conversations themselves require something like an echo chamber. When you have a conversation with somebody you met yesterday or 2 days ago for the first time, you carefully find something that you think you both agree about. And it might be, well, you know your topic here, it might be about that. Other circumstances, it might be movies. You find something very small where you can have some sort of difference, a little difference, nothing too deep. It's not like me going up to you and saying, I hate Trump, and you saying, no, I love Trump. We're not going to have much of a conversation that way. We find something small enough that we can disagree about in a civil sort of way. That's how conversation works, even when it's not among strangers. When you're talking, you generally agree on so much, including a common language that you can speak to communicate, but also the norms of speech and conversation. You agree also, I suspect, in the value of collaboration and values like that. That's what enables conversations to go forward. They are almost always little iterations on small differences. That's how conversations work. There's nothing wrong with that. But they work that way because understanding itself, to understand something is to assimilate something new to your existing context. It also is an echo chamber in that sense. This is how we think. Knowledge needs echo chambers in this sense. Doesn't mean that all echo chambers are equal. Some of them are using bad evidence. They're not thinking very well. They're uneducated. They can be mean, vicious, racist. They can be horrible. But the form of echo chambers is how we understand, and it's how we have conversations. So part of the solution is just to educate people so they won't be so wrong about how science works, for example, as the anti-vaxxers are. But there's another issue at stake, which is how to come to belief. I'm just wondering if I'm in the right version. So, sorry, I just skipped over Dana Boyd. Dana Boyd, who's a data scientist, wrote about a year ago about one of the problems with media literacy. You know what I mean by media literacy? We're teaching people how to understand, not get fooled by the web. And she says, that's great, of course, but it doesn't give people a way to come to, it tells people how not to believe, it doesn't tell them how to come to belief. It's only half the answer, and you end up with, she says, you can end up with people who are cynical, who refuse to believe anything. So this resonated with me because a long time ago, when I taught philosophy, I used to teach critical thinking, or informal logic, where the aim was to help students see how ads and propaganda and politicians and others go wrong in their thinking. And so this is one example. This is Babe Ruth, who I imagine most of you don't know was a very important baseball player, giving his opinion about medical science. This was how ads work. And so you would have a class, number two, you'd have a class discussion about why, arguments from authority. I'm not making that logical mistake. So that, teaching a course like that, I think, made perfect sense back then, before the internet, when we had like television news and the like, because we assumed that we had a baseline truth. Just listen to the news every day, read the newspaper, and now you're going to be informed. Occasionally there are some errors, and so you want to sort of clean your glasses, but once you do, you now have a baseline truth. So that sort of critical thinking or media literacy made perfect sense a while ago. It's not so clear now that we just need to clean our glasses because we have a baseline truth, because, we had a baseline truth, and these are the TV news people I grew up with. And you may notice something they have in common. They were very good at their job. That's not what I have in mind. I mean, they were professional and committed and honest, but it was a bunch of white guys. And so there was a natural bias. They were American, middle class, or more educated white guys. So we had baseline truth, but at a pretty bad price, which is that marginalized voices just weren't heard. They didn't make it on at all onto the news. So now we recognize that this was baseline truth. It was a white guy baseline truth. We've opened up the flood chambers, and so now the marginalized can be heard. But those marginalized, I'm going to have to switch versions because I'm getting to the part that actually changed. And I'm very sorry, I'm just an idiot. The marginalized includes, these are American neo-Nazi racist fucktards, and then, but it's not just them. They're not the only marginalized people in the world who are now being heard. So just pay attention to something else while I try to find the other version. Here it is. I'm gonna have to start all over, if you don't mind. Just go back to slide number 1. Okay. Okay, so I think if you move your head, even on the big screen, you may get the optical illusion. If not, just believe me. It's a pretty weird optical illusion. So our brains, the issue is, we have all this free speech. Our brains are not very reliable. They're subject to optical illusions like this, except not just optical illusions, also cognitive illusions. Things like, well, like this. If you're sort of, you think maybe yes, but everybody around you says yes, you will suddenly have your beliefs confirmed because you are subject, the brain is subject to confirmation bias. We also now know that simply refuting a lie actually gets people to believe it more. We don't know why. Brains sort of suck at this. We're not well wired for this sort of thought. So free speech is not enough because we have brains. Our brains are not good at this. And so we've removed the baseline, the white guy baseline truth, but we have unreliable brains, which are subject to platforms that make money off of clicks, don't care what you click, and bots that are trying to, whose interests are not our interests. And so we have panic in the street. And how do we fix this? That's what you all want to know. How would I know? I don't know. I don't know how we fix it. Well, actually, I did. Oh, this is really embarrassing. I'm so sorry. I reorganized. I had been up all night, okay? I was watching the news. And now I'm back here. Okay, we'll skip right. That's okay. We're back on track. It's okay. I'm so sorry. Okay, so part of the issue. Oh, is it showing our grandchild? It's so cute. It could be so much worse. I don't know where it's getting the image it's showing it for the other monitor. Thankfully, it's an adorable grandchild. So, we have thought knowledge is a special sort of thing that has its own wall. It's tried to wall itself off from the very beginning. It's knowledge. It's not like belief or opinion. It's knowledge. You can trust it. It's its own thing. And once we know it, it's settled. It's in this container. It's in this cave. And it's separate from all these other things. This is exactly why we invented knowledge, to be separate from all those other things. Except it's not. It's because knowledge is part of everything. You can't talk about power or community or justice or democracy or even what it means to play without talking about knowledge or the absence or the type of knowledge or the rules or rules of evidence, what role knowledge plays, the rejection. Knowledge is deep into everything. It is the opposite from walled off. It is a part of everything. It turns out this is, it's really complex, therefore. It's not a thing in itself with rules of admission, and once it's in the knowledge container now, it's knowledge. It's subject to every force, good and bad, in our world. It is deeply complex. We tried to make it simple. It's not. Knowledge is so complex. It's both local and it's fallible. Even though the internet is global, of course, knowledge is local in the sense that the rules of evidence, what we count as evidence, what we count as worth knowing, how certain we have to be, the structures of authority are all local down to the community, down to the family level. All knowledge is local in that regard. We didn't want that, but it is. Just as we learn on the net that everything is local. We encounter people from around the world. We fail sometimes in talking with them, and we learn, therefore, that, wow, we're much more situated in our own culture and our own neighborhood than we thought. We can bridge, but we come from some place that has rules and values, has everything. And we see so many failures, including our own on the web, on the net, in every type of way, that every conversation is full of pushbacks and corrections and failures. We're local, we're fallible. And we learn also on the net, there are no binaries anywhere, never anywhere, because it's so complex, and anything you assert boldly on the web will be contradicted in useful ways and with linked sources. No matter what it is, there are no binaries. Binaries are things that we invented to make lives simpler for ourselves, including to make computers. So here are some non-binary things. This is the greatest time to be a seeker after knowledge. It is also the greatest time to be a complete idiot, and both are true for us all the time. Each of us, all the time, are seekers after knowledge and complete idiots, in one way or another. In the West, we tend to believe in free speech, whatever that means locally, but free speech, openness. It turns out that it's not enough. We also need local rules. In America, we sometimes call these rules of the pool, because the pools will post rules like no running and no splashing. Conversations need rules as well. We need evidence, but we need the sort of evidence that we are uncertain about. That's why we need the evidence, because we're uncertain, and no amount of evidence should ever make us entirely certain. We need engagement, which means some form of commonality, but we also need it across differences. We encounter that every day on the net. It is integral to knowledge that it be engaged and do so with a respect for and a love of difference. We think of knowledge, traditionally in the West, as something in our heads, which is the weirdest idea ever. It's just we actually experience our world that way. But no, knowledge is something you do with your body as well, by exploring, for example, by being a human being, and most importantly, by caring, by a human being who cares about things. That's why we care about, for example, knowledge. That means in the context of all of the things of our world, whether it's all these fundamental things about being human, that's just random samples, it means that knowledge is a struggle. We wanted it to be final. We wanted it in the box, done, reliable, boom. And that sort of knowledge exists, at least exists enough and is useful. I wouldn't ever deny it. But to be human is the struggle all the time, and knowledge does not escape that. So what do we do about knowledge? I still don't know, sorry. But I think that engaged struggle, which knowledge is one form of, looks looks a lot like this. And I'll also say, you know, it looks... Don't fail me now. Last slide, keynote. Ah, did it! Woo! Keynote to the rescue. Now it's going to go past. I think it looks a lot like this as well. So, thank you. I'm sorry I went on so long. It's just been a long day.
Thank you very much, David. Muchas gracias. Es el momento de abrir un turno de preguntas.
May I ask how the translator was? How was the translator? That is a hard job. I'm sorry. Oh, hello.
Hello. Thank you. Amazing. Very fun. Good talk. Even the mistakes were even more enjoyable. I just had a question, which is you, essentially to me, you've traced out this history.
You're speaking English.
Yeah, you've traced this history of knowledge and acknowledged that there's the, like you said, the white guy baseline of truth. And then eventually we get to this new networked kind of knowledge, which is a different way of understanding the world and more subjective and more local and so on. So coming from my context in New Zealand, we have a bicultural society. So we have the Western British colony, and then we have the indigenous people. And what I recognize from the network knowledge, it just sounds a lot like indigenous ways of knowing, and from what I can tell as a settler person myself. So I guess my question is, have you, like you've gone this very long journey to get around to something that to me looks like a pre-modern understanding. Have you also gone the short way around and studied pre-modern cultures or pre-literate cultures?
Not enough to attempt an answer. I am, excuse me, I am aware of that. That's why at the beginning I said West. West is actually shorthand for, it doesn't include indigenous Western peoples. It's just,
there's a really, really great book called On Orality and Literacy by Walter Ong.
Yep.
It's
yep.
my favorite.
Yeah, no, there's great work that's being done. The only thing I would point, so yes, thank you for saying that. I would remain interested in the ways in which, just because it's what I'm interested in, the ways in which the technology enables a type of connection that's simply, so the form, even though the form exists pre-West or indigenously, the expression of it brings with it its own stuff, its own capabilities, its own limitations, its own evils. I don't think that trolling or let's just leave it at trolling or bots is an important part of the indigenous experience of knowledge. We had to invent that along with the technology. So I think it's a really important point, which I cannot address directly. But yeah. Yeah, no, thank you. I have a million other things I cannot address directly. If you, feel free.
Si no hay una pregunta, a mí me gustaría hacer una. Bueno, la hago en español, sí. La pregunta es la siguiente, y tiene que ver en relación con las instituciones culturales y en especial las bibliotecas. Una de las promesas de las políticas culturales o de las bibliotecas es que el acceso al conocimiento nos puede hacer mejores ciudadanos y por lo tanto tenemos una capacidad mayor para elegir las mejores opciones cuando llega el momento de la votación. Bajo ese modelo y bajo... ¿No está funcionando?
I'm not getting any signal. Oh, I'm supposed to be on a channel? Is that what the 5? Aha! There's a channel, that's not volume. Okay. All of us are seekers after knowledge and complete idiots. I am so sorry.
¿Le repites o repito yo otra vez?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm still not hearing anything.
Okay.
It's not staying on. I think the battery's out. It goes on for a second. Thank you.
Bueno, tiene que ver con la... espera un momento.
Is this one on? Oh, it's on? Oh, 4. Aha. I thought you said 5. Okay, thank you.
Is it working now? Okay. Bueno, lo que decía que tiene que ver un poco con...
That was at 3. And are you saying 3, channel 3? Okay. That's a fortunate coincidence. Okay.
No.
Marcos, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to everyone.
Decía que tiene que ver con la sesión de mañana sobre las bibliotecas y hacía una pequeña reflexión sobre las políticas culturales, el valor de las instituciones culturales como lugares de acceso, de alguna manera, al conocimiento, a la cultura, bajo la promesa de que eso nos va a hacer mejores ciudadanos y de alguna manera, en el momento de que haya unas elecciones, optaremos por una opción mejor gracias a que tenemos acceso al conocimiento. Esa sería como un poco la idea general de por qué, una de las razones de por qué las instituciones culturales o las bibliotecas son importantes. Pero claro, ahora que, como describes, has descrito en la presentación, lo que entendemos por conocimiento es algo diferente, no es algo consolidado ni algo a lo que se accede, sino algo que se va construyendo. Parece que la relación entre producción de conocimiento y producción de comunidad o de toma de decisiones a nivel local, parece que esa distancia se estrecha un poco más. Es decir, que ya no es tanto la promesa que se aplaza, ¿no? Si leemos más libros, al final acabaremos eligiendo mejor, sino que ya directamente el conocimiento es un asunto más bien político, ¿no? Que está siempre como en disputa y es un espacio de tensión. Y me gustaría preguntarte entonces cómo podrían ser las instituciones que ya no tanto dan acceso al conocimiento, sino que lo producen o que generan controversia, ¿no?
A simple question. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a great question for libraries as well, which I'm going to say all libraries think about and are being challenged about because of the internet, where some of what libraries used to provide is now available on the internet. Libraries, I think, still have a crucial role. So knowledge creates communities. All communities are communities of knowledge. They have some beliefs, and generally true beliefs, but they have some set of beliefs that they just take for granted. They're not arguing all the time about everything. And that's really important. Merely giving access to knowledge is not enough. It's something that we should be doing, for sure, but it's not enough. Just like giving an open space for speech turns out not to be enough, we also need moderators and incentives and rules that are baked into the software, affordances and the like, and the same thing for access to knowledge. So having said that, I want to put in a quick pitch for open access publishing, which is becoming more and more important around the world, in which scholars of various sorts make their work that used to be available only in very expensive journals, so expensive that very few libraries can actually afford to buy them. They're making this available directly to anybody who wants them through Creative Commons licenses and the like. Open access publishing will be transformative. I edited an open access series for MIT Press for books about technology. And I still publish closed access as well, for a really simple and good reason, which is I am a total hypocrite. But open access is tremendously important, but it's not enough. So one of the things, so in a way, I think Cass Sunstein, who talks about the echo chamber argument, is right, that if you give people access to everything, they will go to the stuff that is most familiar to them. I don't think that's always bad. I think, of course we do, because we're interested in things, and It speaks our language, but we do want to encourage as much encounter with differences as we can. I take that as a global cultural good. We want people to recognize that there are other people in the world who think differently, who have different cultures and different, I don't have this group, I really don't have to tell you that. Simply saying, oh, here's something from another culture that maybe you haven't even heard of, and it uses ideas you've never encountered and vocabulary that doesn't translate well, go read it, is not going to work. People won't do it. They don't know how to read it. And so one of the things that I think we need is better ways in which we encounter not simply what's different, but what's just different enough. And that's something librarians and libraries are fantastic at. So if you return a book, I know this is about, libraries aren't just about lending books, but I'm going to take this as my example. If you return a book to a library and the librarian says, how did you like it? And you say, oh, I loved it. Are there any more by this person? Or the librarian will say, oh yes, she's written these other books and recommend them. But we'll also say, if you like this book, I wonder, there's another book you're probably not going to find, but I think you might really like this one too. It's a little different. It's not set in the 19th century, and it's not quite a mystery. I think you'll really like it. Librarians are really good at that. And that is enough difference that you're willing to listen. We also need guides. We need people who can explain one culture to another, which is very hard. It's like listening, it's exactly like it is. If you listen to music from another culture, if it's very different, you very likely won't like it. You won't know the scale, you're lost in it. You don't know how to appreciate it. And for that, you need a translator, somebody who can say, oh, this pattern repeats, or this instrument represents that, or the other thing, or it's not a 4/4 beat. You need somebody who can translate culture and ideas. Those people are very valuable, very rare, and we need to be honoring and promoting them as well. Sometimes librarians can be fantastic at that, but you never know who you're going to encounter, who can tell you why you should like throat singing, Mongolian throat singing, which is hard for a Western-trained ears to appreciate. Again, I really feel like I don't have to tell any of you that. I'm sorry. You should be telling me.
Hey, thanks for the talk. I had a question. I guess it's going to be a bit open, so sorry about that. It's about the future of knowledge. So I think until now we've had most of our knowledge has been generated by humans. More and more humans generated thanks to technology assisting them in maybe seeing patterns in data to create knowledge. And now we have more and more systems that have the autonomy of creating knowledge alone. I don't know if you heard this, like for example, there's some system that see patterns in research articles to create Wikipedia articles on these researchers and seeing patterns and interesting aspects that we missed. I know like the investigation crime agencies in France, for example, use software to also see patterns in investigation and solve cases that are like 30 years old. So there's more and more knowledge that is generated by machines. And of course, we're expecting it to grow in the next 50 years until, I don't know, what you think is going to happen with artificial intelligence. So what do you think is going to happen with when most of our knowledge probably is going to be generated by machines? Or is it going to be?
I don't know. So I'm very interested in machine learning. I've been writing about it for a couple of years. And I'm more positive about it than most of my friends. We all agree that the dangers, there's some very clear dangers, because machine learning, as you know, finds correlations in the data that it's given. That data, because it is data coming from human beings, reflects all the prejudices and biases and misunderstandings that we have. And so it can amplify those errors. And that's a great danger. The thing that really fascinates me about it is the way in which it thinks differently than we do. So yeah, it can go through massive amounts of, let's say books, and analyze without knowing anything at all about what the words mean, because it's just a stupid machine. The words literally get translated into numbers. It's just a meaningless number. It can still find patterns sufficient that the translation devices that we carry in our pockets, you know, our phones, which have gotten pretty good, are all machine learning based. They know nothing at all about the rules of the language, the syntax, or the semantics of it. It's just correlations among numbers. It can suggest correlations in all cases, almost all cases. It should do so, should also give the probability, the confidence level that is an integral part of machine learning. I mean, this stuff comes with a correlation at some particular level of confidence, and that should be expressed as well. You know, there's 73% chance that, that these two things are related. I'm hoping that will train us to think in terms of confidence levels about our own human utterances, but provides, the way I think about it is that, especially for scholarly use in the digital humanities, it provides new pathways for humans to explore. It can say these two things look very much alike, and that may be a revelation. Oh my, I didn't, but it's going to require humans to care about that revelation. So I think it's going to be a tremendous help in unearthing new possibilities for knowledge that human cares about. And most of the knowledge, the correlations it creates are going to be trivial and uninteresting. That's already the case. You know. Does that answer your question? Sort of, kind of? Yeah.
Yeah, so my follow-up question, you talked about how it would help us to generate more knowledge by seeing patterns that we don't see. My question would be, how are we going to interact with that knowledge in the future when we won't be the ones that generated it? Like, for example, a usual example is like today your doctor is a source of knowledge to you about your diseases, about your health. And we have this level of trust towards our doctor when he tells us you have a cancer. In 5-10 years, maybe your health data will be given into Google Health System that will tell you, oh, you're going to have a cancer in 23 years. And how will we cope and interact with that knowledge when it's generated by machines, and when our level of understanding of how it's going to be generated actually decreases because the knowledge becomes more and more complex? So
I think it will depend upon a set of variables about the knowledge. So in some instances, if Amazon or whoever, let's say Amazon uses machine learning to recommend new books to you. And generally you don't care how, humans can't always understand the algorithm. It doesn't matter, it's just a recommendation. You know, big deal. If your there is a system, there's a bunch of, obviously, a lot of work in medical diagnosis. There's one particular system called Deep Patient from Mount Sinai Hospital in New York that's a deep learning system, which is a machine learning system that knows absolutely nothing about the data that it's given. It's simply finding correlations among patient records. And it is able to predict some diseases better than humans can. Just statistically, it does a better job. And I don't remember what they are, but one's like kidney cancer, another is schizophrenia, which is unpredictable. It's already doing it better. So I think it's going to depend a great deal on the circumstance. So if you go to your doctor and she says, you better go on a diabetes diet because it looks like you are heading towards diabetes, and you say, why? And she says, because Deep Patient says there's a correlation and we don't know why it is. You might do it because going on a diabetes diet is not the worst thing in the world. You're cutting out some carbs, and et cetera. If your doctor says looks like you are at a strong risk of breast cancer, you maybe want to, because of this system, you may want to think about a mastectomy, a preventive mastectomy. That's a way more serious sort of operation, and you may not want to trust the statistics. Over time, I don't know what the answer is, but it depends upon the context. Over time, I think you all use some type of mapping navigation thing on your phone. You know what I mean, right? I'm going to guess that not one of you, I use it all the time. I've never asked Google how it comes up with its maps, with those instructions. I mean, if it works, I'm going to keep using it. If it doesn't, I'm going to stop using it. In that case, it doesn't matter. If it works, it's good enough. There's going to be a million examples because AI is going to be everywhere. And we're going to come to some of the stuff we're going to regulate. For sure we're going to regulate. We're probably not going to regulate Amazon's recommendation of books or Google Maps navigation system. Maybe, I don't know, but probably not. We well may navigate the AI between driverless cars, driving driverless cars or autonomous vehicles. Like everything else, it's going to be complicated. I don't know.
Yes, so if it's next question, yeah? I'm over here. Hi, thank you so much. It was really inspiring and delightful. And I have this question, and it's about, in your theories, what you think is the role of big companies, because you talked about the baseline truth with white guys, and in my understanding, it's not like white guys in general, but media company owners that choose what are the news. So, and then also I was thinking in the current day example, we have the filters that we do ourselves, but there are also big companies like you were mentioning, Amazon and Google and Facebook, that also do filters for us. So I'm super curious about like their interest and how you think it plays a role in this.
I'll tell you, I don't think my opinion is any better than yours on this or anything, actually. I guess I'm trying to keep it, I'm failing, I'm trying to keep it short. My personal preference in many areas, but not all, is, for example, the sorts of answer I gave just a minute ago, is to, I'm worried about over-regulating the explicability, the insistence on making machine learning understandable to humans. That worries me a great deal, and it's a more prevalent thing in Europe than in the US. I know this is not exactly on your topic, but I'm going to get to your topic in a second. This sort of metaphysical belief, I think the world is more complicated than our brains are capable of, and machines are a little better at it. They're not perfect, but they're better at it. And I want them to be able to discover these sorts of correlations that we wouldn't think of, and that are pay more attention to details as opposed to abstractions and general rules. So I worry about over-regulating the algorithms. It's a very complex issue. I think there are other ways of regulating the outcomes that we want, because we don't want bad news, and we don't want racist search results or racist filtering, for sure. The big platforms are each different in their incentives and in what they've built, and I think need to be considered one at a time, which I'm not going to do, and I wouldn't do very well anyway. For me, it's a social choice that is being made around the world by different cultures about how much autonomy we're willing to give to commercial entities, especially when those commercial entities become a primary source of news. I don't have an answer to that. I'm deeply conflicted. I'm a American Jewish liberal guy who was totally in favor of open free speech until maybe 10 years ago, and I'm still trying to deal with that. So I don't know. I think it's a deep, difficult political and cultural problem. It will be played out there, and I don't think it matters what I say. So the worst possible answer. You're welcome.
Hola. Hola. Sí. Voy a hacer la pregunta en español, ya que no hay más preguntas. El problema que planteamos en participación democrática y en la resolución de políticas públicas es cuál es el conocimiento que nos ayuda a tomar una decisión, ¿no?, en un gobierno. Raramente este conocimiento se fundamenta en consensos científicos. Has puesto algunos ejemplos que sí, pero son muy escasos y la mayoría no hay un consenso científico sobre cuál es la verdad que pueda amparar una política pública. Y bueno, por otro lado, yo vengo de la física, de la ciencia, donde el conocimiento se ampara en un error, con lo cual siempre sabes que la verdad está en un margen de error. Y cuando uno se desplaza hacia ciencias más inexactas, digamos, ese margen de error comienza a aumentar hasta que ya incluso desaparece. No podemos hablar de margen de error en ciencias sociales o en ciencia política. Pero sí que es verdad que sería útil para la ciencia política o la participación democrática tener alguna indicación para el público o para incluso los políticos donde pudiéramos hacer referencia a la precisión del conocimiento dependiendo para qué clase de política pública estuviéramos hablando. Y te pongo un ejemplo ya para que quede claro. Si vamos a regular lo de las vacunas, podemos apelar a un error menor que seguramente si vamos a regular la inmigración, donde no hay ninguna clase de consenso científico exacto, ¿no? Sino que te encontrarás a una parte de economistas, sociólogos, politólogos por un lado y a otra por otro. Entonces, mi pregunta es si hay alguien, alguna referencia de alguien que haya intentado dar algún tipo de orientación a la hora de hacer referencia a la verdad del conocimiento.
Let me answer this way. The history of factual knowledge is very recent. It's around the year 1800 that we invented facts, the idea of facts, nuggets of truth that cannot be denied. And they were invented in large part, in order to be able to persuade, to give a factual basis for social policy, to be able to present these so that there would be a basis for policy other than what rich lords in the parliament wanted. And it served an important purpose. And over the course of a century, facts became the thing that we use to settle disputes. They became our hope that if you could reduce the argument to facts, then the argument would end, that facts would carry the day. And just like I wanted to be really careful in saying that anti-vaccination people and medical researchers are both in echo chambers, because I do not want to leave the impression that I think that they are equivalent in their truth. In the same way, I want to be careful here. Facts are really important. I like facts. I want people to, but they don't do the thing that we want them to do. They just don't. We know this empirically by trying for hundreds of years. They do not settle arguments. The anti-vaxxers are not going to start getting vaccinations because we have given them more facts, because they reject the facts, and they're wrong to do that. That doesn't, in a sense, that's not my point. The point is facts don't do the job that we want them to do. They just don't. It doesn't mean give up on facts. It means then you're not going to change social policy with them. We need to continue to present evidence, of course, factual evidence, other sorts of evidence. It's not going to be enough. Knowledge, what people know is so deeply embedded in their values and what they want, their desires, their incentives, their social position, their education, everything. Knowledge is not separate from life, from social life, from physical life, from biological, from personal life, from cultural life. Knowledge is not a separate realm. It's too bad, but it's not. And so I don't know that more facts and more knowledge, I don't think we're ever going to come to agreement about knowledge, which means that people will be wrong and some people will be right. I don't think that facts are going to do the job that we want them to do. How do you persuade people? I'm not an expert on it. The only thing, and I'll be done actually with this answer, the only thing I would say, especially for the sort of the wonderful the 57 people group that's going to think about proposals and propose them, which I think is a wonderful, humane thing to do. The only thing I'd say is, yeah, give them evidence, try to model how to have a conversation that respects the evidence, of course. but also think, which you're already doing, I'll put it in my terms, think about building a knowledge network with those people, around those people. How can a network, an open network of knowledge, how can they be at sort of the center of an open network of knowledge to discuss the policy issues that they are considering? That, I think, is more likely to move them towards truth and goodness than, not what you're suggesting, I know, but more knowledge and facts. So now it sounds like I'm against facts, I'm against knowledge, so I've really totally miscommunicated, and I apologize.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation, and thank you for what you're doing. All right, good. Sorry. It's solid state. It's probably not broken. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for taking that. I hope that.